Welcome to Thoughts on Ministry podcast with Ray Eppard, a podcast focused on helping you be more effective as you serve God. Now, here's your host, Ray Eppard.
Hello, glad you could join us again today. This is my Thoughts on Ministry. I'm Ray Eppard, and currently we're talking about leadership equals change. Leadership equals change. If you would, think about a tachometer on a car that shows your RPMs, the revolutions per minute. And at that point, if you would, if you try to drive down the road 60 miles an hour, but you've never moved it out of second gear. Now, automatic today, a lot of people don't know second gear because it's automatic. But if your transmission got stuck and it never would move out of second gear and you're trying to do 60, you're going to burn up your engine because it will create a problem. It's not designed to run like that at that point. But as it continues to shift, you're able to increase the response. You're able to increase your speed, and it actually flows and functions well. If you would, our lower gears are the doing. First gear is doing. I mean, at that point, the speed that you're going to get out of doing, then you're going to burn up. And that's what ends up happening to some ministers. They actually end up trying to be doing everything, but they're still trying to go 60 miles an hour, and they get burned up. The engine blows in them. And so that's not a good situation. And also, down in that first gear, it really doesn't create a lot of change. I'm not saying it can't have any change, because while you're there, you can do some leadership things while you're there. You can do some leadership things in all of these. What we're talking about is what you're primarily doing. Leadership is the only component that creates change, that creates positive change. The second phase is managing. Well, at that point, you're able to go a little bit faster without burning up the engine, without burning out yourself, because now you've other people are doing things. You're more involved in the managing. But at that point, where doing was for today and this week, managing is for the month and for the season, 3 or 4 months out, whatever. At that point, that's not creating change. It's just managing. Are all the tasks being done? Is everybody doing what they're supposed to be doing? It doesn't end up creating change. Is everybody doing what they're supposed to be doing? All of those things get managed. If they're not doing what they're supposed to, well, we need to get them doing it. That's not change in a leadership sense. That's a change in a management sense. And there are changes that are a management thing where if somebody isn't doing it the way they need to, that needs to change. But the component of getting that to happen is actually a leadership dynamic. A leadership dynamic. Leadership is where change really happens. At that point, you'll always be doing, like with me, one thing I do every Sunday I preach, I do my outline. I can't delegate that to somebody else. Well, I guess you can. I do know churches that do. That whole denominations that somebody sends them their message. I personally don't adhere to that philosophy. But you will always have things you have to do. You will always have things you have to manage. But you have to understand that those components do not create change. Leading creates change. You see, at that point, leadership is moving things from where they are to a more desired future. And with that, there's a number of components that have to happen. You have to develop people. You have to do vision casting, get people on board, different things like it. All of that is leadership. Now, you can be doing over here while you're doing some of that. You can be mixing that in. But the more leadership you're doing, the more the change. But at the same time, again, if you got 25 people, you can't spend all your time in leadership because there's nobody else to do a lot of that stuff. You're going to have to. So what you're going to have to do is mix leadership in there. Don't feel bad about where you are. Know where you are, function where you are, but have your eye on the future. Have your eye on where God wants to take you so that you can move from one spot to the next spot, so that you can move into the capacity of actually spending more time on the future and developing a more desired future. Leadership equals change. Sometimes it takes patience for that to happen, but it does. Leadership equals change. I hope you can join us again next time. This has been My Thoughts.
You've been listening to Thoughts on Ministry with Ray Eppard. Remember to subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter.